This Thoughtful Thursdays episode of Hacking Your Leadership is brought to you by the Top 1% podcast. If you feel like you're struggling, worrying, overindulging, overmedicating, and underperforming in both business and in life, move out of that survival mode and into a life of limitless potential. Subscribe to the Top 1% podcast hosted by Dr. Trevor Blattner. I've spoken to Trevor at length about his personal values and what's important to him. He's the real deal. He's a genuine desire to help others unlock these things that we all have inside us, but that many of us are just unable to harness. His guests include some pretty well-known names in fields like sports psychology, human potential, and leadership, and I've personally listened to about a dozen episodes so far. I keep finding value in every one I try. So after you finish this Thoughtful Thursdays episode of Hacking Your Leadership, search for the Top 1% podcast and give it a listen. You'll be glad you did. All right, welcome to Hacking Your Leadership, and welcome to another Thoughtful Thursdays episode. Thanks again to all our listeners for tuning in twice a week and for spreading the word about Hacking Your Leadership. Don't forget to follow us on Instagram at Hacking Your Leadership, and leave us a review on whichever podcasting platform you use. All right, for this week's episode, I want to talk about job perks. I was one of millions of middle-class American children who watched his father put on a suit and tie every day for work, except on casual Fridays, when he usually wore a polo shirt and slacks. Those dress-down days were a job perk, something above and beyond salary that was meant to drive engagement and retention by differentiating his company from others that might pay him the same salary, but that wouldn't make him as happy. It's a pretty weak perk by today's standards, but job perks have continued to get better over time as companies compete for talent. You might say then that casual Fridays are the great-great-grandparents of the most progressive and forward-thinking workspaces where food and meditation sessions are provided and where you can have Whole Foods deliver your groceries to your car as you're leaving for the day. Companies have been adding gyms, relaxed dress codes, college reimbursement, and very slightly flexible work schedules since the 1990s. In the last decade, however, there's been an almost arms race of sorts to see which companies can provide the most inspiring and engaging work environment. Which place can, through perks, make employees feel like they aren't really even at work anymore. This process of creation ceased being an HR function a long time ago and has since developed into its own industry. There are companies out there whose sole reason for existing is to consult other companies on how to make their workplaces more attractive in order to lift engagement. As of today, free food and gym memberships are ubiquitous as 401k plans, and there's literally hundreds of companies who have adopted things like unlimited vacation policies, paid parental leave, buses that pick up and drop off employees, paid sabbaticals, concierge services that will run errands for employees, work hours that are based on the completion of projects and require virtually no presence in the office, Netflix subscriptions, and I've even heard of health insurance for pets. These are all things you'll find in articles on attracting millennial talent. But why is it that these things are most commonly found in companies where the average age of employees is under 40? Are there corresponding perks for attracting baby boomer talent and Gen X talent? Or is it logical to assume that baby boomers and Gen Xers in the workforce today want largely the same thing as millennials? I think there's a tendency to believe that perks like these only need to be explored in younger companies. That if you're a startup, you have to provide them to stand out from the startup crowd because getting the right talent can mean the difference between making it past your first year or not. But more puzzling is the belief that these perks are only viewed as selling points for younger employees. Virtually all of them are just different ways of giving money and or time back to employees, and the last time I looked, money and time were things all employees could use more of. I've consulted for organizations large and small, and I've spoken with thousands of employees of all ages. None of them would have scoffed at any of these perks. What has happened is that the generational differences in how employees react to uninspiring work environments has led many leaders to believe that there are also generational differences in what employees value or need in exchange for bringing their best selves to work. A work environment like the one depicted in the movie Office Space might lead a millennial employee to just walk out on the third day and never come back, while it causes the baby boomer or Gen Xer to simply disengage and start doing just enough not to get fired. But can anyone really say the latter is preferable to the former? Turnover can be quantified, so it's easy to tell when it's rising or dropping, but disengagement and a lack of productivity are insidious, and they'll eat a company from the inside out. To claim a company's culture is healthy just because turnover is low is a dangerous assumption, especially if you employ a lot of people over 40. When baby boomers and Gen Xers were starting out and moving up in their careers, the potential downside to leaving an organization was much bigger than it is today. Even as recently as 15 years ago, having more than 3 employers in 5 years on your resume would be a red flag to stay away from an applicant. Today, the red flag is the employee who's been at the same job for 15 years. But the differences in reactions to poor work environments that seem to follow different generations are a product of the times, not a symbol of change in what employees value. First, people have always valued their time and their money. More importantly, people have always wanted to feel like their voices are being heard, that the work they do is important and contributes to a greater mission, that they have meaningful relationships at work, and that their employer values them for more than just what they can do at their job. This was as true in the 1980s as it is today. All that's changed is the recourse available to employees when those things are lacking. If you're a leader of people, get out of the mindset there's such a thing as a millennial-centric workplace and try to create employee-centric workplaces instead. Ask yourself what you would value as an employee, not just what would make you stay versus quit, but what would make you truly want to give your absolute best to your company. Those things are much more universal than bring your corgi to work day. The things and stuff element might make you attractive on paper, but if the culture isn't there to back it up, it won't make a difference. Your millennial employees might serve as canaries in the coal mine, since if they are leaving in droves, it's a huge sign the culture is lacking. But don't make the mistake of believing the over 40 crowd is engaged and giving their best just because they aren't walking out. An employee-centric workspace starts with culture, ends with culture, and is filled with culture in the middle. The foosball table is cool, but there are countless foosball tables across the country that go unplayed for years because no one wants to be there in the first place. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you on Monday.